Shut up and sit down.
Yeah? Looks like we're on. Are we on? Are we live? Rock and roll. Welcome back to another day at RamDragon Studio. This is RamDragon. Also known as the artist. Nobody knows as Jason. So, I'm using a new studio software. Hopefully this fixes some things. Notice my camera is black when I turn it on. Yay. Fixed one problem. I also turned up the resolution, so hopefully that'll give us a little bit better overall quality. But welcome. So today is Inktober 24th, and the theme, if I can get my pencil to work, theme today is dizzy. Playing with my pencil. There we go. Okay. Now, I do have background music available in the studio. It's one of the reasons why I downloaded it, but I haven't checked out the copyright settings for it, so since I want to be able to repost this to YouTube, I don't want it to have the possibility of causing problems. And I'm not totally up on all of the YouTube rules, but copyright is one of the things that, as an artist, I've been on both ends of. So, rather than taking the chance, we're just not gonna. Dizzy. I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning like a whirlpool. It never. Sorry, playing with my camera stand here. Okay. Just recentering. There we go. Should be good. It looks like all my elements are showing up. Looks like my stream actually looks better than in my studios. I know my audio gets weird when I turn my head to the side, but with my current setup, I can't talk directly into the camera or directly into my mic while I'm checking the studio. Dizzy, dizzy, dizzy. I think Disney usually talks about head, talks about balance. It deals with what's going on inside the head. I had a bout of vertigo last week that completely incapacitated me for just about 10 minutes. That was the strangest thing. I'm not prone to that type of thing. I don't get dizzy often, but when I do get dizzy, it's almost always a migraine coming in, and I sat down on the couch for a good 10-15 minutes trying to figure out why I was so dizzy before I suddenly got the rest of the symptoms, and I had a migraine coming in. I'm putting elements in before I'm done laying things out, so and this is a mistake I've seen artists make, and it's one that I'm prone to. I get ahead of myself. So what I want to do is I want to refine this face shape a little bit. I'm going to put this nose back in. I'm going to put this brow back in. And that was the mistake that I just made, is I was aiming right here, which is the top of the eye. That's the brow line. That's the eye line, should be right below the brow line. And that's a little bit closer to the nose than people sometimes do, especially people who are accustomed to drawing manga or anime style characters where the eye takes up half the face. Now I do have the back of the head is too large for that face size. And this is an important step for anybody drawing figures. You do have to refine. There is a refining step, and you gotta be comfortable with it. I know, especially new artists, get ahead of themselves and try to get to the drawing part as soon as possible. I'm going to thicken up this neck a little bit and square off this jaw. Let's go a little more on the masculine side, and that means a more square chin. A little more jaw, a little more chin. A little more cheekbone. And quite a bit more brow. Let's take the top of the head off. Because oddly enough, flatter heads look more masculine than larger heads. And it might, it might be an anthropological development in the brain. There's a part of your brain that always recognizes human faces. That's why you see faces in mountainsides and heads in clouds and whatnot. But it's also what helps you identify on a racial level characteristics or traits that are masculine or feminine. And I know it's not a popular topic in today's social environment, socio-political baloney that's going around right now. It's hardwired into our brains. It's part of the evolution. And it's not really something that you can overcome simply by deciding it doesn't exist. Now, with that said, there is a large amount of willfully ignoring it that is possible. And, it's just like with any other instinct. The instinct to flinch can be trained out. Martial artists do it frequently. It can't be completely eliminated. There will always be a little bit of a flinch, but it can be willfully overcome in certain situations. And so the human brain, when you look at another human being, it first of all registers that a human person is there. That's why we have Uncanny Valley in Hollywood. Things that are almost human but not quite look quite disturbing to the naked eye. Because our evolution has kind of dictated that those things need to happen for the survival of the race, need to be able to be identified. I think smaller nose tip with a more pronounced bridge, and bring the lips up a touch. Thinner lips, and let me bring this cheekbone up just a touch there. It's one of the reasons why body language is so important. It's not something you can really teach. I mean, obviously you can teach it to a degree. Something in my eye. Here we go. You can teach it to a degree. I mean, that's kind of the basis of business and espionage. But at the same time, it's part of the human instinct. It's born into the brain. The understanding of posture and facial expressions. And we're going with kind of a bored face here. I'm not too keen on it, but it's time to move on to other parts. I'm going to take the top of the head here. And, you know, when I think of twisting or dizzy, I think of twisting. Dizzy Devil particularly comes to mind. From what was that? Tiny Toon Adventures. We had, when I was in animation school, we had a kind of unspoken classroom habit where somebody would start a hum or a beat or something, and before long we'd get the whole class in on it. And we had quite frequent renditions in the middle of class of Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, and most popular of all, the Power Rangers theme song would just suddenly bloom out of the silence. Somebody would start the beat at the beginning of the song, and before the end of the semester, the first semester where we were doing that, we were able to get the entire class in on it. And boy, the day I found out that some of those guys had never actually seen an episode of Tiny Toon Adventures, I felt so freaking old. I was old. I was 30 when I went back to college. But man, that made me feel that much older. Now here's something I see, particularly anime guys. One particular anime guy get wrong frequently, and it bothers me a lot. That's a masculine collarbone. You get a straight, you got a larger pronounced knob towards the middle, towards the divot, which totally has a name. But then you get a nice straight collarbone right to the edge of the shoulder. Now that's one of the reasons why men tend to have wider shoulders than women, because it's just developmental. We have straighter collarbones. Women, however, have more curved collarbones. They kind of do a wing shape, like that, which makes the collarbone from tip to tip kind of shorter, draws the shoulders in. What is going on over here? It's just a physiological difference. Has to do with the enzymes, the hormones that are going through during developmental stages. I mean, yes, we understand that, quote unquote, men and women are equal, but the truth is, men and women are not equal. And, to go further, not all men are created equal. But that's the thing that's why I get so hung up on the socio-political environment of the world right now. We're so invested in being politically correct that we overlook basic truths that, not all men are able to do the same things. We're not created equal physically. And in fact, that's not even the purpose of that line in the what is that? The Bill of Rights or the Constitution that says that? I think that's the Constitution. Because what the Constitution actually references is, in the eyes of God, all men are created equal, meaning we have no business individually as human creatures judging each other's value or worth. As human creatures. That's the caveat. We can't judge each other's value as human creatures. We can only judge each other's value on the basis of our individual value to society, to make our world better or stronger. And once we recognize that, it's so much easier to recognize that everybody has a part to play, or a gift to share that may not be something you would normally think of. And that's why it's so important that we do recognize that while, yes, in a philosophical sense, all men are created equal, that in a very literal sense, we are all created different. We're all created individually. We are all created to have our own strengths, our own weaknesses, our own struggles. And we're all created to help each other out with theirs. We all have the ability to do that. We had just recently here in Houston, we had that hurricane a couple years ago. Hurricane Harvey came through and wrecked a lot of the surrounding cities around where I live. And my church put together a recovery group And our job was to go out to these flooded neighborhoods and help homeowners begin the recovery process. We would go through the houses, and anything that was furniture had to be put out on the street corner. It was trash. I mean, when you hear on the news, if you're not in the area and you haven't gone through it, you hear on the news that people lost everything to the flood. It's not an exaggeration. I mean, all of their furniture, anything that was closer to the ground than 4 feet, in some areas 6 feet, was waterlogged, and waterlogged for days. And you can't just clean that. It's gone at that point. It's unrecoverable because of the mold that grows on it. You don't want to keep that around your house because it will, in a very real sense, make you sick and kill you. So we would go through these neighborhoods, and I'm not sure how it was organized. I wouldn't even know where to start organizing something like that. But we had houses and neighbors that were able to ask for help. And we organized these work groups, and we'd go out to their houses and their neighborhoods and just pull trash out of their house and put it on the curb for them. Tons, literal tons, not just a lot, I mean literal tons of furniture, of belongings, beds, mattresses, couches, cabinets from the kitchen that needed to be demolished, things that needed to be completely demoed and removed. Just completely and utterly destroyed. And you had to get it out. Refrigerators, pantries, and all of the drywall up to the flood line. And you could see it when you walked in the house. You could see how high the flood got because the drywall was permanently discolored from it. And we had to, I mean, just working with those homeowners and getting that furniture out was just emotionally draining. For me, particularly, that's an issue because, you know, as I've mentioned before, I'm finding out I may be on the autism spectrum. I may be Asperger, or an Aspie, as they're called. And I'm waiting for an official diagnosis, but it makes a lot of sense. I have great difficulty with emotional situations. I don't know how to act. I don't know how to deal with it. I frequently say the wrong thing. Inability to understand and judge social situations. So I tend to stay away from them. And the people who were out there dealing with these homeowners who had gone through such a devastating loss of everything that they owned, all of the memories of their houses, loved ones that, you know, sometimes pictures that can't be recreated because the loved ones are no longer with them, and we had to throw it all out. I mean, it was just trash and emotionally devastating for a lot of people, and I couldn't deal with that. I really, not my forte. That's for other people to do. That's for other people to deal with, other people who are not me, because I'm absolute rubbish at that kind of thing. So what I am good at is tearing crap apart. I mean, being able to go into a house and have somebody point at something and have it completely removed from existence with very little effort, very little further input. That's something that, you know, other people on the work crews were not able to accomplish. individually. I mean, we worked in groups so we could get it done. And that's the key. That's I think right there, that is the key, is when you work in groups, we all have our own individual strengths. We have our own individual talents and worth to give to our groups. But when we work together, there's a larger gestalt that is achieved. And until we recognize that, the differences between us are insignificant compared to the gestalt of working together, I mean, there's really never going to be a true equality measured. Sorry, I went off the deep philosophical end there. So what I'm doing now is I'm just laying in some shadows, trying to get an idea of where my heaviest cross-hatching is going to be. And I've gone into a little bit more comic book anatomy than I normally go into. Get this collarbone defined. And I'm off the bottom of the page, so I'm not going to concentrate on this part too much. There we go. Maybe I want to bring that cheekbone down just a touch more. Yeah, I like it a little bit lower there. And this nose can stand to be just a touch more angular. All right, I think we can go on to inking. How far in am I right now? My new studio has a timer in a completely different place. Nope, I can't find it. I'll find it later. Should only be a few minutes in right now. Oh, there it is, and I can't see it. My eyes have completely failed on me. It's too small. Oh well. We're getting to the inking in a reasonable amount of time today, though. My hand is still sore from yesterday's. Did a lot of drawing yesterday compared to normal. I had a long drawing yesterday, much longer than I normally do. I think once Inktober is done, once I finish the Inktober challenge and have, and I know I'm not doing the full Inktober, since I'm not drawing on the weekends, and I'm really only doing that because of limitations of my recording space. Hopefully future Inktober's will be much better. This year not so much. I don't have the privacy or the quiet I would require at a moment's notice in order to do a full Inktober all the time. But maybe later on in the month or later on this year, probably at the beginning of next year, most likely. Don't get your hopes up. If I can get some traction on any of this, I would very much be open to doing a a 12-hour draw jam or a 6-hour drawing jam or something like that. Just a really, really long stream. And probably not something I would plan on reposting to YouTube just because of its length. But I've been looking for groups of local artists that I could reconnect with, trying to get a social group of artists back under me again. I do much better. I'm not highly socially inclined. I don't like dealing with people on a social basis. But it's something that I know I need to do. And I do a lot better when I'm around people who are sharing my interests. I do a lot better personally. I do more art. I do a lot more creation when I'm around other people who are also doing creation. So I do tend to look for groups of people who are, creators like me. I don't just draw. I do woodwork. I do sculpture. I do a variety of different things. And I might do some of that on the stream eventually, once the Inktober stuff is done. Getting too hung up in the shape of shadows that I'm not going to actually pen. One of the limitations of this particular camera setup is it's difficult to turn the paper to do certain types of lines. just finished catching up on Supergirl, and for some reason, stick it in my head, I like that version of Lex Luthor best. That is one of the best versions of Lex Luthor represented in live action. And one of the reasons why I even care about that is I hate Superman. Not as an idea, but I mean, superhero comics is superhero comics. What are you going to do? But as a character, the way that he's written, the way that he's created is, I find the character to be grating, because it's almost as if everything about Superman is an afterthought. He's designed to be OP. Which, on the face of it, I suppose isn't really that big an issue. There's plenty of other OP characters out there, but Superman particularly, I find him condescending, with very few exceptions. The animated movie All-Star Superman was the first time I'd seen a Superman represented whose character I actually enjoyed. I actually liked it. Because, I hope I'm not giving away any spoilers. The movie's old enough now that I'm not going to worry about that. Because at the end of All-Star Superman, he dies. He's done. He's finished. And it's okay to have a legendary being in your comic book universe, but I think at some point you have to let that legendary being go. And DC has never given Superman that dignity. Or Batman, or the Flash, or whoever. They've never truly given their characters that dignity. And especially these long-running characters like Batman, like Superman, you kind of have to, at some point, let them pass the torch. And there are so many stories with these characters where there's plenty of torchbearers that they can pass those responsibilities on to, but they never do. Because, hey, if you're not Superman, you're not good enough. And that's really one of the things I find the most condescending about Superman, is he's condescending to other superheroes. And, yeah, the fact that every single one of his weaknesses is written as an afterthought, and all of his character arcs are all about how immortal he is, and I mean, it gets tiring and exhausting pretty quickly. And yet there are Superman fans out there. I get that, I understand that, and I'm sorry I'm not going to share it. But I would much rather see a comic book Prime universe in DC where Superman, I mean the original Superman, the Superman from the original comic books, the 1940 Superman, lived and died and is gone from the world. And the guys that we have now are the ones that succeeded the original Super Friends. the ones that were trained by the original Batman, the ones that were trained by the original Wonder Woman. I think those are the characters that would be the most interesting to have in a comic book universe. But even more interesting than that is letting your characters, letting your comic book superheroes have flaws. And again, Superman, yeah, Superman has flaws, but they are all afterthoughts. And the whole thing with Superman and Kryptonite was only ever introduced as a way to give him a weakness that would make him less powerful than a human being. Or rather, allow a human being to be powerful enough to face him. And I think that's one of the things I find fascinating about the character of Lex Luthor. Yeah, he's a villain, he's a bad guy, and I'm not going to debate that part. But he is a human bad guy with human assets and human capabilities, and is still an absolute threat of global scale. I think the worst thing they did to the character of Lex Luthor is decide that he is the foremost preeminent mind on the planet. You got something that nobody else can compete with, and kind of puts it in its own league. And when you're talking about supers, you have to. I will condescend to that. When you're dealing with supers, that means super, higher than, better than, in some way. That's what the word means. So you can't have a superhero or a supervillain unless there is something super about them. It just doesn't work out that way. And yes, I get that from a purely marketing perspective, comic books are written the way they are because that's what sells. And I think a lot of people need to just get off their high horse about what is in comic books and stop blaming comic books about what content is being published, and start recognizing that, some of the things that they find unappealing about comic books, like the very misogynistic way in which female characters are represented almost throughout all of the comic book pages of every comic book ever published, despite the fact that they might be some of the strongest women in the comic book series, they're still drawn in such a way that their butts are clearly visible or their cleavage is on display. And there's a high level of misogyny to that. And rather than complain and moan about the unfairness of it, need to recognize that, comic books are being marketed to 14-year-old boys, for crying out loud. They are being marketed to the weakest of us in our weakest state, when we're being flooded with hormones and emotions and thoughts that we are unequipped to deal with and unprepared for. And frankly, the already compromised brain anatomy of man is hard enough to deal with. Makes that kind of thing hard enough to deal with without the additional hormonal influence. But once they realize that it's marketing, it's sales, it's what sells, I think there's much better ways to deal with it. I mean, rather than attacking the comic books or even video games. I feel the same way about all these news stories targeting video game violence as the source of all this horrible violence in the world right now. I mean, what absolute dreck, what moronic reporting comes up with that? Because the violence has been around much longer than video games. And we have a larger population now in the world and in this country than ever before in history. And the rates of crime per thousand, I mean the per capita rate of crime has not been going up, it's been going down. Violent crimes have been decreasing in this country. But we're not reporting that because that's not what sells. And if you think that news isn't about sales, then you haven't been paying attention to the world that the news is reporting on. The news is 100% about sales. What's that? The news isn't selling you anything? Ha! I'm sorry. Have you tried a different brand of dish soap lately? What put that idea in your head? Could it have been an ad that you watched during the news? The news isn't about selling you stuff. Give me a break. That's their product. That is the product of the news. The product that they sell the most of is you. What, you think Facebook and Google are bad? Oh, that junk has been around far longer than Facebook or Google has. You put an audience in a chair and you guarantee viewership for a commercial. And a news channel that gets more viewers can charge more for their commercial time. You're a commodity. And it's why I get annoyed at social justice warriors. The self-proclaimed ones, as well as the ones that other people are accusing of being SJW, as well as the people who are making those claims at SJW. I mean, yeah, so what? I mean, at least those people are seeing what they perceive as a wrong, something that they would like to see improved, and are saying something. And what are you doing? Reading a comic book and complaining that somebody doesn't like the sex in its pages? Psh, grow up. That's, you know what? I think that encapsulates my view on society altogether. Grow up. I think I'm going to start a a political party. That's going to be my political party, is going to be grow up. We're not going to run on any platform. We're not going to run any campaigns. I'm just going to have campaign stickers that just say grow up. Because I think the one thing that will fix the junk going on in Washington right now is just if everybody grows up. Okay. Where are we at? I got a few more areas where I can add some shadows and crosshatch. Kind of a weird rant today, and I apologize for that. I'm not sure why that was on the mind, but whatever. About 10 years ago, when I first put my YouTube channel up, I got it to put my portfolio out there, to have some place to have my professional animation portfolio. And I thought about doing a YouTube channel for it, actually doing a vlog. And this is back when YouTube was so new. A lot of people were still figuring out what was going to be on YouTube, what they were going to do with YouTube, how they were going to make money on YouTube. And I was part of that crowd for a hot minute, thinking, you know, this is going to be the future of TV. It's going to knock out cable completely. I still think that'll eventually happen. And with Disney going to Disney Plus, I think it's closer to happening than before. Knock out the television competition and the other streaming service competitions, which I think is a really stupid marketing ploy. But if you don't go for complete domination and fail, then you don't end up with high saturation either. So I get it. People don't quite agree with Disney's concept because they don't really quite understand the long-term economics of it. I'm not saying I do. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on economics either, but I do know that companies that try for a monopoly and fail tend to stick around longer, tend to be more successful than ones that don't try for monopolies and also fail. And I know that didn't make any sense, but whatever. Words are tough, especially when you're drawing. I'm getting towards, I know I said that about 20 minutes ago. I'm getting towards the end of this one. My hand is still stiff from yesterday. I've been stretching it out all morning. I stretched it out all night last night. I just really made a mess of that line. My hand is not steady enough for this brush right now. I'm not entirely certain what I just drew. I think this is quite a bit more Western comic book than I typically put up here for Inktober. But I think that's okay. Little empty, but yeah, we'll let it go. We'll call it done here. If I try to keep going, my hand is going to go completely numb, and then I don't know what. Put my signature up here, my RD logo, and the date. What is the date? 2167? There we go. There is a dizzy man right there. Thank you for joining me for this drawing, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.